Good morning and welcome to episode 37 of Talking to Artists, a podcast that introduces art lovers, would-be artists, and art collectors to working artists of the day to understand a bit more about their practice, their business practice, their processes, and a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. So that kind of makes it fun. Today we're going to be talking to Renato Foti, who is a glass artist. I have known Renato, I was doing the math last night, and I think it's like 35 years. So that's kind of cool. I'm really looking forward to kind of connecting with him. And it looks like we're just going to wait for him to join us. And hopefully he will be here soon. So I'm currently at my cottage studio because, of course, of the isolation. So we did our 2 weeks of quarantining here, and it's been pretty lovely, but very cold, like minus 20. So it's been kind of cool actually today to have such nice weather. And it's been really great. So it's kind of working on a couple of different things and playing a little bit, which, you know, you always say you're supposed to do. And I always know that I want to do, and I never seem to have the time for. So it's been really wonderful to be able to have some time just to kind of play. Okay, looks like Renato has joined us. So I'm going to actually invite him right here. Hopefully he can come on board and chat with us about his glass, which I just love. I really regret not getting a piece of his years ago.
Hi, can you hear me
Hey,
okay?
I can hear you great. How are
Good.
you?
I never usually use the buds, so I'm doing wonderful. Thanks.
Well, part of it is because I want to, I'm actually making this into a podcast, and so it's nice to have really good audio because then I don't have to do as much work on it. So
Okay, good,
that's my
good.
COVID plan, which I'm not there yet because I still have to learn how to do the podcast part of
Oh,
it.
don't ask me because I'm not up on this stuff. I just
No.
made a little jig to hold my phone like this so that I can have a good view and I don't have to sit there with my arm for half an hour either. So,
Oh, I know, because that's painful. Yeah, my sister actually sent me this really great tripod I'm using. It's super steady, so that we can actually, record while I'm painting, which I haven't actually done yet. I've just used it for stuff like this
oh,
and Zoom
good.
calls
Yeah.
and stuff. But that's
Well,
been
with all
pretty
my
cool.
camera equipment, I think that's easy for me to do too. I have a lot of gadgets, so I think you have to just
Yeah, like you're
start
a
to use it
camera
more.
guy.
I know, but you know what's funny is there's nothing more boring than watching a guy like myself make glass art because it's really tedious. It's not tedious when you're doing it, it's therapeutic,
Yeah.
but to watch somebody cut glass and place all those little beads and everything down it would drive you bonkers. So
Well, it's interesting you say that because I have people a lot that kind of say, "Oh, it'd be great if you could document your process." And I'm like, but same thing with staining the wood. Like it's therapeutic and it's very an engaged process as you're doing it, but it's really not that interesting to watch it.
no, it's not. No, no. And even if I'm carving, I it's kind of funny. A little while back, you felt a little burnt out, and we all go through it as artists. I mean,
Hmm.
and this last year has been pretty good, and I've been doing a lot of those retro mesh pieces, which are tedious, and all the small pieces of glass, and your fingers get all cut up, and it's not like it's bad. They're not like bleeding or anything. It's just that it's always that fine, sharp glass, and you're cutting hundreds and hundreds of them. So ultimately, it does take a toll, and
Hmm.
you need a break from that stuff. So I started a soapstone carving that I finished, and it was taking forever to
I
do.
saw that.
Yeah, it wasn't quite done yet. I have the completed pictures now. I'll throw them on Instagram, but it's not really my art style. It's kind of a homage to some stuff I collect, and some of these older Japanese pieces that I've played with and collect, and just having fun with it. And I really enjoyed it. But it's one of those art forms that if you do it and you want to get paid for it, it's like casting glass. Um, it takes so many hundreds of hours to do a piece in some cases that you
Yeah.
can't sell it for enough to justify even doing it, right? So you kind of have to look at what's marketable and what's not, and so that's one of those things you have to do just for pure pleasure, because I don't know if you could ever justify making a living on that stuff.
Well, I think it's also when you're doing something new and different, I find that there's that kind of a whole aspect of problem solving. Like, haven't done it before, need to solve a problem. There's an intellectual challenge there, right, to try and figure out new materials and things like that. And then you kind of have to figure if you go down a path after you've solved the problem, is it something you continue to want to do and sell it,
Yeah,
or is
it's
it
true.
something that was just done for you, right, just for the experience of it?
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things you can play with often. It's just you need a downtime to do it, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and
So
I have a huge affinity for glass too. I love glass, and I used to do stained glass, and so I've been sort of again in the back of my head. It's like trying to design a stained glass for my kitchen door, right? It's a panel panel door, which I haven't got around to yet. But the other thing I've been toying in my head for a couple of years now, I just haven't quite figured out how to do it, is to merge glass with the work that I do and mobiles. I'm kind of have this
Oh,
thing for mobiles. I don't know.
oh,
So
but it's fun though. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think it would be good. So I don't know. I haven't really produced anything yet. Like the actual structure of the mobile, Calder's mobiles, and they're
Of
so
course, yeah.
elegant, right? And obviously, I don't want to copy his stuff, but I like that kind of that connection where it being off-centered like that. But the ones
One
I've
of
done so far are super kludgy.
one of
So
my earlier commissions, maybe 20 years ago, I did some custom work for some people in the United States, and they had three Calders in their living room, big ones. They had a pretty big living room, and so people.
wow,
I know it's pretty amazing when you see people that have collections like that. So
yeah.
it's kind of fun. But
And I love his work.
yeah,
Like I just find it's just that combination of art and whimsy and joy. Like there's just something about a mobile. I don't know. I just find it
yeah. Well, it
really,
moves. It moves. It's alive.
yeah,
In a
yeah. So
sense.
anyway, I'm working on that. I've got too many things
Good.
I want to work on and not enough time, I guess.
Well, you're a person that keeps too busy, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a bit
Yeah,
of a sickness.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
every time I get rid of
You have
something.
problems, let me tell you.
Thanks. Well, you've known me
Just
for years, so you know, right? I've always been like
uh,
that.
yeah, but you know what? I actually, yeah, we went to university together and took fine art classes together. So
Yeah.
people don't
You know what
know
I realized,
I've known
Renato?
you for over 35 years.
35 years. I calculated, I did it last the
Yeah,
math last night. I said,
35
holy
years.
shit, that's scary.
I know. I used to ride in the back of my motorcycle periodically. I remember that.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that was good.
but no, the
Yes.
arts, it's wonderful. It's in your blood. You just have to do it and enjoy it. There is a business side to it. I mean, I think that's one thing that I don't know if I fell into it luckily or just evolved. I think everything evolves. That's what it's really about. Is you start something and you perfect it, and maybe there's a market for it. And once there's a market for it, then you have to take that next step to get it out there in the world, really, either
Yeah.
via shows or advertising or exhibitions, social media, whatever. I mean, and the rules of that have changed over the last 30 years, really. It's 30 years ago, it was a matter of getting some really good galleries, and it's your way of advertising there. But now it's very different.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
but I think also, I think you've always been, in my remembrance of you, even now when we were kids, you've always been a good salesperson. You've always had a good eye for what you have and what you're doing and how to properly promote it without it being promotion.
No, exactly, yeah. I
Yeah.
find that you can't sell art. I mean, if
No.
I'm doing an art show, I stand there and I tend to not even talk to people anymore. It's not that I don't want to talk to people. At my age now, I really don't want to that much anymore. I'd rather just disappear from my booth. Here's my phone number. If you want to buy
Have a
something,
glass of
call me.
wine.
Yeah, have a glass of wine. I'll come back and take your credit card number. But it's really up to the individual to buy it. It's if they want to learn about you, they've already probably decided they want to buy the piece. Now they want to learn a little bit about you. It's you can't sell art. It's one of those things that I mean, okay, that's not true if you're a gallery. I think that's different when you have a
I don't know.
hundred.
I think you
Yeah,
can help people make a decision. I think you
yeah.
can push them when they really want to push and they're feeling a little bit guilty maybe spending money on art. But I don't think you can talk somebody into something they don't want or they don't
No,
like.
absolutely not.
I agree.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not. Yeah, it's not going to happen. And they know what they like right away. One
Yeah.
minute somebody walks by your piece and goes, "Ooh, I don't like that," and the next person thinks it's the best thing in the show. And there's
Yeah.
it just doesn't matter, right? So at the end of the day, it's really just the client will find you, and that's why you have to get out there. You just have to get out there to show your work to as many people as possible, because when it happens, when they like it, they will move on it. But if
hmm
they don't see it, they don't know what to move on, right? So
Well, exactly. Yeah. And I think too, especially as your stuff gets more expensive, like glass, I think in its own, basically because of the cost of goods on it is obviously more expensive than starting off and buying a little painting or something.
for sure.
But even for that, like it does take people time to make that final decision because it's not an impulsive decision, right?
No, and I think once you get into the larger piece, I mean, I'm pretty much only, I shouldn't say only making larger pieces, but my business has really turned into, let's call it fine art pieces that would hang on the
Yeah.
wall, quite large, maybe for corporations or, you know, uh, somebody's living room or something. But, I would say the average, gallery cost, like a retail cost of a piece, is probably in that $7,000 to $8,000 mark that I'm selling now, really, and in some cases they're buying two or three, depending on the wall size. So you're right,
Hmm.
it's a substantial amount of money that somebody has to spend to fill a big space, right? So
Yeah, but your
yeah.
costs also are pretty high. Like unlike
Oh,
my
they are,
costs, which
yeah.
really are panels and paint, and it's time, but it's not. There's not a lot of outside costs for the actual production of the work, right?
Yeah, that's a problem with sculpture.
Yeah,
Sculpture means you have to buy welders, electricity, kiln. It depends what type of, okay, stone. I've started collecting a lot of, you know, antique jade pieces and things like that. Well, I don't know if you've ever shopped for jade or materials like that, but they're excessively expensive, really difficult to work with, and I
yeah.
love it because it's in the olden days they never had diamond tools, so they used to carve by abrading. So it would take thousands of hours to make a piece, right? And that's why it's so valuable. It's not just well, the material is too, but
Yeah.
beyond that, somebody spent uh, a long time to make a carving. And that's what sculpture is, though, right? There's a lot of cost of material and tools and shops,
Hmm.
and where I
Well,
think,
even
yeah,
shipping it. Like I was looking on your Instagram, and you had the huge crate with the shipping. I think it was 5 panels or whatever, and all
yeah,
the padding and everything. Just to, I must be so scary to ship
it
that.
is. I use trucking companies now, and they are insured. Just insuring 5 panels like that is about $300, 250 to 300. Just insurance. The crate's about 600, 500 to $600. I have them made now. It's just as you get older, it's just easier to contract that out.
Yeah.
Um, the trucking company is about $550. Then you got brokerage to the US is about $48 typically. So you add all that up, it could be between, if it's one piece or five, it's almost the same price. It doesn't matter really. Just the insurance
Hmm.
goes up more. But I find it's about $1,000 minimum, just my cost to ship a panel to the United States, and most of them go there. Very few go
Yeah.
into Canada. So when somebody buys a piece for say $7,000, there's $1,000 for shipping. If they buy three, it's maybe 1,100 for shipping, right? It's not as bad. And
Right.
that's one of the dilemmas I have with going to Europe, because now you can't go land truck, you have to do air. So now to ship say you have to remember, everybody knows the galleries take their cut.
Yeah.
Um, and so the cost that you get and I get as an artist is one half typically of what they sell it for. So um, that the real problem is if you go to Europe and try to ship something, maybe it's a $10,000 piece, you're getting five, but shipping could cost you two and a half,
Yeah.
right? So now shipping is maybe 40 or 50% of the cost of the piece, and it's not. It doesn't work as a business case at that point, especially if you're
Yeah.
sending work on consignment. So
Yeah, yeah, totally. But I remember sending a piece years ago. Yeah, and it was going to Scotland, and I think I was just starting out, so I think the retail price was probably about maybe $2,500 or something. And yeah, and the shipping price I got was 1,500. I'm like, and they're like, well, just pass it on to the client. I'm like, the client is not going to add another $1,500 to a
no,
$2,500 painting,
no,
right? Like,
no.
otherwise they'd probably buy a $5,000 painting if they could afford it. So yeah, I remember having to be. That's when I really learned how to be super, super aware of the size of the packaging, because what
Oh,
happens when they packed it, they put it over that limit.
and then there's
So
insurance, there's other factors, and then I mean, when you get out of the countries, they have different rules. They have VAT taxes, and
mm,
like how does the taxes? How do you deal with that? So you have to make sure your paperwork's done right, and it's very
yeah,
complex. So I mean, it's really easy for people to say, "Oh, just you need to do a show over in Asia or something." Well, it's not easy, and try to get your
yeah,
work back after the fact. It's not going to happen.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. I'm
yeah.
lucky. The gallery I've got just outside of London, I do the crate. I give them all the information, and they manage all the shipping and stuff for it, because
Oh,
they said it's just
nice.
easier for them to do all of the, like to your point, all the customs and the VAT and collecting all that stuff and stuff on my behalf. So I'm pretty happy about that. But it
Oh,
also
that's
means
good.
that I
Yeah.
do maybe one shipment a year, one big shipment a year, because it doesn't, again, make sense to do all these little ones.
No, it doesn't.
It's
You
going
can't do
back and
it.
forth.
No, I have an opportunity for. I'm not going to say the city right. Qatar. I think it's Qatar.
Oh
It's
yeah,
in,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, near United Emirates, for a project there, maybe for five pieces, through a design firm. So I'm just waiting to see what happens with that. So I mean, I think there when you buy five, they're going to cover shipping. They'll deal with the freight forwarder. You drop it off at Toronto Airport, and it goes. That's probably doable because it's sold and
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about shipping the work back to you, you know.
Well, I find typically designers, maybe they're just better at educating their clients, but they typically seem to charge additional for shipping, and the client pays that, and
Yes.
doesn't seem to be
Yeah.
an issue. I just sent a big
No.
one down to the U.S. as well, and yeah, shipping was $1,000, and I'm like, ooh, but client paid it, so
That's right. Yeah.
they knew, right?
And there's no way around it. I mean, if you're in some countries and you want, let's say, you know, world renowned art, it's coming by plane. You know, if you live in a small country or an island somewhere and you're looking for spectacular artwork, it's not gonna be local. Everything's coming from overseas, right? So you know,
Yeah,
people are used to shipping. Um, I think it's just hard for the local people to deal with it, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
for sure. So maybe we kind of jumped right in, but actually, I'd love to talk a little bit about what your process is. Like, I know you do the retro mesh and the corporate, those kind of color wall pieces,
yep,
which are probably the piece I would say you're probably the most well known for. Like, I see those a
exactly.
lot with
Yeah,
ADC and a lot of corporate buying. But then you also are working on kind of these sculptures and the masks and almost like religious icons, which is kind of interesting
yeah. So
as
so
well.
yeah, I'll explain that. I think I've always collected art, you know, and I think as you get older, and I love going to antique markets and things, but typically higher end ones. And I travel a lot, so you know I've been around the world many times, and you know you buy very beautiful things that are mean something to you sometimes, and you bring them
Hmm.
home. And I started collecting a lot more the last few years, and I think part of it is financially. You're at a place financially where you're able to spend money on stuff. You don't have other debt, and let's say you're established at that point. So, and I'm buying things that I can turn into other art pieces. So it's kind of inventory for me in a sense. So I'll buy
Well,
something
that's
that's,
cool.
yeah. So that's where I got into some of these crosses. So here I can walk around and show you a couple if you want to,
Sure. Yeah, that'd be
because
great.
they're in my office here. I just have to figure out if I can take this off the thing. So this is one that let me go around here. Here, I'll do this one. Okay. So I found this in a name. This is probably about 250 years old. It's quite a valuable piece. And I'm not necessarily religious, so it's not about that. But I have a glass cross. I mounted it on the glass, and I did a cast glass base
Hmm.
that is actually cast glass. And I've done a bunch of these because I find a lot of the religious icons, you know, very historical, especially when you go to places like Peru. After I did this trip to Peru over a year ago, they had some of the most amazing religion icons that I've ever seen in churches, like priceless artifacts. I'm going, oh my God, the art and the you know the Catholic Church and everything about that, which is kind of disgusting. The fact that people are starving and living in places where the Catholic, this is political obviously, but you know the Catholic Church has a lot
Yeah.
of money, and it just sort of got me thinking about some of these icons and all those things. And uh, so I started collecting those and turning them into other things. And I've done that with quite a few pieces. This piece behind my shoulder here is an
Hmm.
old kind of a wooden religious doll. I don't know if it was religious or not, but it was this cool piece I found, and I did a glass base for it. And so I'm doing things like that, where I taking old and turn it into new with my own castings and things. I don't know how sellable it's going to be. I don't care necessarily, but I think that's the thing with art. What's popular today, and maybe 15 years from now, I think some of these pieces, and it might sound crazy, but I think these are museum quality pieces that I'm making uh, for some of these things. Like I'll walk around and show you some other stuff too, because you might
Yeah, it'd be
find it
great.
interesting. 'Cause I don't think you've actually been to my place, have you?
No, we kept meaning to and talking about it,
Yeah.
and never happened, and then COVID.
So
So definitely
um,
after this.
yeah. So these giant mannequins. This is another series I did, and these are quite large.
Yeah, I saw those at ADC. I think ADC carried a couple of those at some of the shows.
Yeah, at the shows, and I had one outside the Gardner Museum, that was
Right.
a transgender one, and this is another cross here where I have like crystals,
Oh,
cast
cool.
glass. So it's quite heavy. It's quite big. Um, And so I'm using natural materials. This is another one here where I actually repaired. This is an ivory, probably from the 17th. I need to get you on 7. It's hard to see because the light's behind it, so I'll go
Yeah.
here. But that would be
It's beautiful.
17th century. Very old, and again, made a cast glass base, and just doing some really fun things with it. And then I have these, I don't know, the skull series.
Yeah, those are really cool. I like those a
Yeah.
lot.
So there's some there. I'll walk down to my studio too, if you don't mind.
And so most of the stuff that you're selling is are the mesh pieces, right?
Yeah, that would be let's call it the main money maker. Sometimes the other stuff, I mean, I think it will sell. It's a relatively new series, so it's one of those things that
people have
takes
to
some
get
time.
used to it.
Yeah. So this is a crocodile. It's actually full size. This is a giraffe. This is a narwhal, which is a whale skull,
Oh, wow.
and a 6-foot ivory tusk, as you can see, pretty big.
Yeah.
Walrus, and these are all from Inuit areas, right? So these would be food for them, and I find the skulls are really cool because nothing goes to waste, right? It's kind of a homage to the animal. It's polar bear, and I got lion and some baboons and different things, and it's another one of the mannequins here, and that's a studio here, quite a large studio. I have stuff in the kiln right now, so I have some commissions I'm working on, and so I have the 2 large kilns here, and all the glass, and that photography area at the back. Yeah, so this is at the lower level, and then I got art everywhere, right? And then glass cutting stations are here, and then all the glass is right over here. So yeah.
How many hours a day would you figure you work on your art?
It's one of those things. It goes in stages. So I'll walk back upstairs. Because I have another career, right? I'm also an engineer, and work at Rapid Gear. So me and my wife run the company. So today I'm home working, but it's really a combination of 2 jobs in a sense.
Yeah.
But I'm always working on art. So this weekend I'll get my kilns going again. So most weekends I work because I like to. If I don't work in my studio, I'll get really bored, right? So yeah.
Well, I think you were always laughing at me about how busy I am, but you're also the same way, right? Like you're a testament to to people that like I did for many years as well. Like you can have a full-time corporate job and still be a full-time artist.
Yes,
right?
and I do consider myself a full-time artist. Yeah. Just because I do something else doesn't mean I don't work on my art.
And don't put the hours in, right?
Yeah,
There are a lot of full-time artists that probably spend less time on their art than you do in terms of being able to
100%
fit it in, right?
Yeah, I get up early. I mean, I was already welding this morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, making hooks for my art pieces, and the kiln it ran last night. So you finish it off, you get it going by 7 o'clock at night. It runs all night. It's with a computer, So it's kind of a constant process, right? So
right.
Yeah. There's another one of those pieces up here, which is kind of a. This is about 300 years old as well. It's wood and it's cast glass and a piece of vertebrae and an ivory Jesus on top. I have a pretty crazy collection.
Pretty wild,
of things.
Yeah, they're really neat. But your background, because I think when I met you, obviously you were doing an engineering degree as well as a fine arts degree. But your engineering background must have actually been really helping because a lot of your art is very technical, like with the kiln and the welding
I think so. Yeah, in terms of being a craftsman, I think it never hurts to have an understanding of materials and metals and cements and whatever you're doing. I think that technical knowledge is really helpful for sure. I don't know about the mathematics of it. I don't think too much of my art uses mathematics.
Probably does though. I mean, calculating, how thick the glass is and how long it had.
That's easy math though. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's easy because you know how to do it. But the other thing is, I think that you touched on it a little bit before too, is part of it is understanding the craft and committing to your practice. But the other part of it is having the business side of it, which I think you've always been really strong at in terms of getting the work out there. But the third part of that, which I think is really wonderful about you, is you're a very generous artist and you're a very generous person. And I think that that's part of building that community. I know when I first started out and you introduced me to Nancy Grenier of Rouge Concept,
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
by the way, I saw a couple months ago and she said to say hi. I hadn't seen her in
Oh,
ages.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But, that was one of those things that for me starting out, it was really nice to have you make that introduction to a gallery and to help me understand how to work with galleries and then how to understand how to take that constructive criticism she had for how to make my work better and to continually improve. There was nothing in it for you, right? Other than a friend doing a friend a favor. But I do think that I can see your fingers in a lot of stuff that is generous and giving as an artist to the community. And I
Oh,
think
that's nice of you to say. Yeah. I've
well,
done
I
that with
think
a
it's
lot of
good.
artists that are starting out, especially when they start to ship to the United States, because they're not sure how to do it, and
Mm-hmm.
who to deal with and the best way to get into that market. Because, I mean, that is a big market there. Canada's wonderful, but we're 1/10 the size, right? So,
Yeah.
if you're, it just, and I think that's one thing that I try to let artists that are trying to make a name for themselves understand that if they're in Toronto, and Toronto's Canada's biggest city, and they only show in Toronto, ultimately you're not going to sell much because you can only have a few galleries there.
Yeah.
And once your work kind of gets out in those galleries, people see it. You might have sales strong for a few years, and then ultimately it will start to decrease. And that's happened to every gallery that's carried my work since for 35 years. I mean, they only have their certain customers, and unless you're in a touristy area where they're getting new customers every week because there's cruise ships coming in. It's the same customers at Petrov that they always had. And I know it changes a little bit, but ultimately, you have to expand more in your city. That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah.
And artists don't realize that sometimes.
Well, I think
Yeah.
especially if you're an abstract artist, which both of us are, not including your mannequins, but I think the reality too is that Toronto is really primarily the only abstract city in the country. So if you do landscapes, then you have the opportunity to maybe go to Calgary or, Montreal or, Vancouver. But even if you hit all the big 5 top cities, you're right, you're going to run out of customers in Canada pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I do travel across Canada often for work. And believe it or not, there are some really good galleries in places like Regina and Saskatoon, and I've been to Calgary and Edmonton for galleries, and there is
Mm-hmm.
abstract work out there. There are just some really good artists out there, as
Yeah.
well as Quebec. Quebec is amazing, but typically Quebec carries Quebec artists. They don't
Yeah.
usually have a lot of artists from outside of Quebec. Even though I've shown in Quebec, I think the norm is it's kind of local.
Does seem to
Even
be.
in and
Yeah.
even in yeah, yeah, and even in some of the bigger, well-known galleries, I think that that's the way they tend to do it there more. Um, and it's funny, some people from Quebec have bought my work, but they bought it in the States. And then you find out they're living in Canada, and you have to ship it to them. And say, "Okay, that's in Canada. I'm actually in Montreal in
Yeah.
a week. You want me to deliver it?" They're like, "Wow."
That's way better. Yeah.
So I know
Yeah.
it's funny, but it's true. Yeah.
Well, and I think you're also the one that
But
put me in contact with ADC, which has been really great for me as well. Like in
that's
terms
right.
of,
Yeah, and Petrov as
yeah,
well, I think too.
yep,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
knew
Well, and
Petrov you knew about. That's cclose to your house,
Petrified
but I
Noobs are close
introduced
to
you to
me.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think
But
that it's nice to be able to, if you're going to go and embark on something that's different and a little bit nerve-wracking, like doing these art fairs or doing something like ADC where you don't know if it's going to be worth it. It's nice to be able to, tap into your community of artists and kind of say, hey, honestly, does this work for you? And how does it work for you? And
yeah,
do you think it'll work for me, sort of thing?
it does. But even then, there's never a guarantee, right? People have to understand that. I've done art shows where I've spent a lot of money to go down to Florida, ship your work, attend a show, and nothing sells, and you try it one more time, and then maybe 2 pieces sell. There's no rhyme or reason. It is risky,
Yeah.
but and I do have to say this, but somebody might call you 4 years later and say, "Oh, I seen your work. I remember it. Now I'm ready for it," and it happens. It really does. So I
Yeah.
think you have to look at art shows as really building a foundation. Um, and that's really what it is because you don't always get a sale at them. Um,
But I think that's
and
why
you
it's
know that
even,
you've done enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I think that's why it's also really important to remember that while you're sitting in your booth. You talk to as many people as possible, collect your names in your database, continue to court them and woo them, and build a relationship with
Yeah.
them so
Yeah.
that when they are ready, then you're kind of right there front and center. And I think that's the other thing a lot of artists don't do is they don't continually follow up. And,
You know
you
what?
know,
I'm guilty of that. Yeah.
I think everyone's guilty for a while, but I think that, marketing 101 tells you have to touch someone, 9 times before they kind of will make a decision and probably another 5 before they actually decide to purchase. So if you give up
The,
after the first email, you're also leaving opportunities on the table
you,
from people who truly want to buy
oh,
from you,
totally.
right? They just get busy.
But the little joke of it is, though, when I do an art show, I spend more time going to visit the artist friends of mine because I don't see them very often, and I'm not at
I
my
know.
booth that often. So,
I know, me
and that's
too.
funny. Where's the guy at this booth? I don't know. He's probably visiting somebody, having a beer somewhere. Cool.
Yeah, but don't you tell? Like, I could totally tell though the shows where I'm like, wow, my sales weren't very good today. It's like, oh, that's because I did too much socializing. I got to keep my ass back in the booth.
Uh, now
But
I'm not on Wi-Fi. My picture's good. Are you seeing me okay? Because you seem to
yeah,
be in low resolution now. Okay. Yeah.
it
I'm
could
not
be
sure
me
why.
too. I'm at the cottage, so it's kind of my Wi-Fi is sometimes a little bit
Ah.
erratic.
Okay.
Yeah, yesterday it
Yeah.
took me 9.5 hours to upload a video, so I don't know. Hopefully it's
Oh
good.
my God. Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what's next in your
So.
future? What are you working on? In terms of taking your business to the next level, or different shows, or
Well, I find, okay, I mean, if you want to talk about my business a little bit, I started off as a sculptor doing, let's say, relatively expensive castings. This is a long time ago. Okay. This is before I did the dinnerware stuff. And then you kind of get into these crafty galleries, um, uh, gift shops, I mean, I used to sell to Barney's of New York, and they were buying some pretty cool stuff of mine at the time. And it was a really good customer. And this is quite a few years ago, and you kind of get distracted and you're doing more, let's call it low volume production items, and I would say that's more the craft world. And then with those retro meshes, they got larger and bigger and more complex. I tend to sell to fine art galleries now more so than craft galleries. Okay, so
right?
there's a difference there, and I just got into it. They actually sold some of my work in the past recently, and I sent 3 pieces down to a new gallery in Boca Raton called Rosenbaum Contemporary, and I mean they're pretty high end galleries. So I think my goal, and I'm not sure how easy it will be, is to take that to that next level of um, fine art gallery that is one of the better ones in the city, for example, right? So,
Hmm.
um, and I think in some places that's easier to do than others, but I think that'd be a nice place to go. Then you can maybe you know do a new series that's maybe a little bit more complex or more to it in some cases,
Or based on the
and
colors of the area to a certain degree.
yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
can. But I went to Series 2 Retro Mesh. I mean, it's confusing for people, but you can see a difference. But Series 1 was one price, and I said, well, I'm going to add more complexity to this, and there's an extra firing. I got those little squares with those pinstripes, and it takes a lot longer to make them, and they're almost double the price. I mean, 80% more expensive, and um, so that's a different market for that too, right? Different price point. So.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's what you want to do sometimes. It's just kind of add to it. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I love these icons where I'm taking antiques and turning them into something else, but the price points are going to be pretty high. I mean, some of those. I don't know if you've ever bought a Norwal skull before, but I mean,
No, I can't
royalty
say I
used to
have.
collect them. No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a lot around, but uh,
No.
but the people that own those would be Queen of England. Like that. That's what they. I don't know. There's a new book by Taschen called Cabinet of Curiosities, and this is what the nobles collected. They collected antlers and turtles and uh, skulls, all sorts of crazy stuff. And because they were like that was science back then. I mean, natural history was really uh, front row science 150 years ago. Okay,
Right.
and this is the stuff that people had. Um, and some of those things are it's really cool and rare, very rare. And to turn it into art, somebody have to spend a lot of money on that piece because just the skull itself is, $10,000 really, right? So maybe
Yeah.
more. So then if a gallery sells it, now it's 20, and then now you got my art with it too, which took a long time to make. So you're probably talking a $40,000 sculpture. So that's a whole different market, right? Where's it going to sell? Who's going to want it?
Right.
But I think ultimately one day it does happen. It's just that might happen after I'm dead.
Well, let's
So
hope not. Well, but the
no,
other
but that's
challenge,
how it used to be, though. I mean,
yeah,
you studied art history. We studied art history together. I
yeah,
mean, if you go back a couple hundred years, artists died starving. And it's only recently that I think you can make it a good life as a living artist. I mean, I know maybe back in 400 years ago, some of the artists that did the work primarily for the church. They were
yeah,
sculptors and artisans working primarily.
yeah.
Their only
They did
customer was the
well.
Catholic Church. Yeah, they
Hmm.
did okay. And they might have had some employees and stuff, but it's it's a world that it's very different. And I think nowadays, if your work to become that valuable, I don't think it's that common that artists can sell 80 or $100,000 pieces while they're still alive. I
Yeah.
mean, there's only a couple of galleries that is in that range.
Well, the only one I can think
Um,
of off the top of my head would be Charles Pachter, who
yeah,
sells
maybe
his work.
Batavia Gallery too. Yeah, down
Yeah,
on King Street.
yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty high end. And then when you get to New York, you get some of those, like there are galleries around, like in Vancouver and Toronto that are that level, and obviously in Europe and New York. But I mean, that's such a that's that one out of a million type of thing. And maybe none of us ever get there, right? But um, I think you have to make the work and see where it goes.
Well, I think if you don't
Um,
work the work and you don't look at pricing it in a way that's fair to you as the artist, you're never going to get there. So you have to start, right?
no, no. But I think once you get to that certain price point, it takes you totally out of the local market, though. Like
Yeah.
it just becomes your market becomes very, very small very quickly.
Well, and you certainly
So
can't really probably sell it yourself. Like you have to really go through a gallery so that they've got their reputation, but also their client base that you really don't have access to.
absolutely, yeah, you're not going to sell it yourself easily. No,
Yeah.
no. So another
Well, that's pretty
problem with
exciting.
the yeah, thank you.
So you were
So
saying another
oh, the other
problem with,
problem with some of these other things I'm doing is you can't ship it into the United States. So if anything contains you know, a walrus tusk, for example, I can ship it within Canada, even though it was legally obtained. You can't ship to the U.S. There's a lot of rules on, and actually, I'm learning this in the antique side of the business with valuable antiques from other countries. It has to come before 1970, otherwise you could risk having to give it back to the country. So if you could start
mhm.
looking in articles on things like that, where big museums like the Smithsonian's and some of these major museums had to give works back to other countries that they might have had in their collections for a long time because they were taken out of the country sort of illegally at the time, or who knows how they got out of the country, right? Because so
Yeah.
that's something you have to really watch nowadays. So if you
Well,
went to say
yeah,
Iran and you buy, yeah,
yeah,
you can't
you have
bring
to be
things home
careful.
that easily sometimes.
I ran into
Yeah.
that even. I was looking to buy a mahjong set that was ivory, and it was on Amazon or whatever, or eBay or something. So it was like, and it had all its certification, but yeah, they couldn't ship it out of the country.
Yeah, it's difficult, yeah. And ivory within Canada, and it stays in Canada, is totally legal. There's nothing wrong with it. Um, obviously it has to be antique ivory, and there's
Yeah.
different dates for it, but there's a lot of rules for things like that, right? So it's yeah, it's kind of crazy. So
Wow, shipping resin painting seems super, super easy now.
it does, I know. Oh,
I'll never complain again, Renato.
but
Okay,
yeah.
well,
So how
I
many
think
people?
it's,
How many people
sorry.
typically join these? I'm just curious. How many people are on here now?
Let me see how many
Is it-
people we have on
I
now.
see five. Is it only five
Yeah,
people?
we
Six
don't have
people.
that many people. I find that usually what happens is after it gets posted, a lot of people listen to it afterwards. So anywhere between
Okay.
five and 700, and then I've got some on YouTube as well. But it's one of the reasons I want to
Okay.
actually. I've had a lot of people kind of say they tend not to watch it; they tend to listen after the fact.
Oh,
And so
interesting. Okay.
that's why I want to make it into a podcast, and then it'll be easier to just kind of download that. So it should be
Good,
kind of
good.
fun.
Well,
Hmm.
it's a great way to connect with you anyways, because it's been too long. So,
It has been,
um,
yes.
yeah,
I
when
know I
social
miss our nice
distancing,
dinners, our lunches we used to go
oh,
to,
yeah, a glass of wine, always a glass of wine or two.
or two. Yeah,
But you know, well, let's do that once we're able to frequent some restaurants, and we'll get together soon.
absolutely. And I would love to come out and see your studio. It looks amazing, and I just love glass anyway. So it'd be really
Oh,
great to see some of the pieces as they're being born.
well, good, good. Well, thank you very much, and
Okay.
we'll
Well,
hopefully
thank you.
connect soon.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed that, and yeah, good luck with your stuff. I look forward to seeing your next icons and your skulls and things like that, and your maps.
Great.
I liked your maps too. I saw.
Oh, they were fun. I know. But I think
Yeah,
that's the stuff you do more for commission, though, right? So, anyways,
yeah,
I know I
yeah.
can keep talking here, it never ends, but it's okay. We'll talk to
Okay.
you soon.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Renato.
Yep.
Have a great day. All right.
Okay.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Bye bye.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me again. Next week, we've got Deanna Fitzpatrick, who does actually rug hooking. So that will be really interesting because I haven't talked to anybody who's kind of a fiber artist. So that will be kind of fun. Once again, if there's anybody that you would like me to interview, please reach out, and I'm happy to reach out to them and see if they're interested in doing that. This will be posted on my Instagram page as well as Facebook and on my YouTube channel, so YouTube/Kate Taylor Art. And as soon as I get my podcast up and running, I will let you know when that's ready to go too. So have a fabulous day, and we will see you next week.